Lovely way to start the morning with a bit of great gospel music to start the day. My name is Rosa Maria Cisneros. I am at CDARE, which is at Coventry University in the UK. I'm very excited to welcome all of you to our Lab Day. Our Lab Day is called AILEY and Curating Screendance into Festivals. We are very excited to welcome you to our session today, where we have some lovely guests from number of different places and experience, and they offer us perspectives, diverse perspectives on looking at dance and screen dance and film festivals. And we'll be using Alvin Ailey and this latest film to explore some conversations around, to explore some themes around dance films in festivals, diversity in the cultural heritage sector, particularly around Black and the African Diaspora dance community, and also looking at curatorial techniques or methods and some strategies that have worked, maybe not worked, and offer some key takeaways for everyone who's listening today. As I said, I'm Rosa Cisneros. I am a female sitting in a white chair with a black and white graphic design top. Olive skin tone. I have black circled earrings that are hanging down. I have my long black hair pulled back, and I'm sitting in front of a burgundy wall. As we always do in our lab days, this is a space to have an open conversation, a dialogue that's respectful. So I encourage us to critically disagree, to have very strong, informed opinions, but we can always do that respecting each other and ensuring that we are, yes, honoring and doing it with love and kindness. Without taking up too much time, I'd love to introduce our guests. We have Baldo de Rosa, Mercy Navide, and Michelle Aaron. Thank you so much for, maybe you'd like to just have a quick introduction of who you are, and later in your presentation you might expand on that a little bit more. So maybe Michelle.
Hi, good morning. I'm sitting in a walled room with the yellow light behind me. It's very plain actually, but I might get interrupted by dogs. That's the one thing I wanted to say to begin with, because there are several in the house and the door always manages to ring at exactly the wrong moment. So
no problem. No problem. We have family-friendly, pet-friendly events. So please, they're welcome, and you're welcome to keep your cameras on or off. So no problem, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mercy?
Sorry, I I got there in the end. Okay, hello everybody. Nice to be here. My name is Mercy, as you heard, Mercy Nabiri. I'm a Black African female with black curly hair. I'm wearing a red dress with a light black jacket, and I'm against a blurred background. My pronouns are she, her. And do I present my, well, I'm a consultant and creative producer for African Diaspora Arts. And through my company, Karma Arts, I work with individuals and organizations on strategic programs to connect communities globally. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mercy. And Baldo.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, Rosa. I am Sinibaldo de Rosa, and I am a white man I was born in Italy, and I am wearing glasses and a black shirt, and I am behind me there is a kind of floral white, dark white or wall. And I am an anthropologist and dance researcher, and I'll tell you more about it, but I'm also joining here in terms of my role as event secretary for the Society for Dance Research. So we'll speak more about this.
Thank you. Thank you, Baldo. Yes, so we have Marie-Louise, who's also part of the Weave team. She'll be tweeting and also sharing some little bites of today's event online. We are recording this session. We encourage you to use the chats to ask questions. We have a small group, but that's okay. It'll allow us for more discussion time. We also have Kozer, who is our behind-the-scenes tech guru. So if you have any questions or need any support with anything, please do reach out to Kozer, who's giving us a nice thumbs up there, or myself or Marie-Louise. Yes, we'd like to frame this conversation within the capacity building Weave work that we're doing. And to do that, we have Fred Troyen from KU Leuven, who sent us a video. This video frames this idea of cultural communities and what we mean within the project, how we've been looking at this topic, and what we've been doing to ensure that we're working with Europeana, which is a digital library that houses over 50 million objects. And when I say objects, that means audio, video, images, and throughout the a big part of the project is looking at what content is there and what content is not there. And the content that is there, if it is framed within a maybe dated perspective, how is it that we can correct that? And so we've been working a lot with community members. That includes the Roma community, as well as the Portuguese folk dance community. We have the Catalan Casteller community. We have Slovenian castle. So a real mix of communities, and obviously the dance community. But in that, we realized that there was a very Eurocentric perspective that was within the prod that was being part of the project, and we realized that there was a little bit more that we could do. So through our connections and network and knowing you fabulous people, I thought maybe this is an opportunity to look at how we continue to develop ourselves. And so without further ado, I will play the film from Fred, our colleagues at KU Leuven.
Hello, welcome to this brief LabDay. I am Fred Truijen from Leuven University, and together with the partners in WEAVE, WEAVE stands for Widen European Access to Cultural Communities through Europeana. We are preparing for you a series of capacity building workshops as a second round in LabDays that we do to foster understanding and innovation in the way minority content is represented in heritage collections, and in particular how this shows in Europeana. As you know, Europeana is the European portal to contents of heritage institutions. And when you aggregate this content and bring them together from different sources, it strikes how the contents have been described from particular points of view. And this poses a special problem for minorities in Europe. Minorities such as, for example, the Romani people, notice that they have been documented in these official collections essentially as foreigners, as people with another culture that is not the mainstream culture of the institutions that hold these collections and are now in the process of bringing those online. And so the idea of our LabDays is, in the first place, to get an understanding of what the real diversity of perspectives in cultural practices really is. And secondly, to derive from that insights in how we could teach institution professionals to better the way they add descriptions to their contents and they select and curate these contents. Often these contents have been selected from an external point of view and not from an interest in the symbolic value and the cultural meaning of what the cultural practice is that is documented. And so what we want to offer is insights that we can use to train professionals in the sector. This could be catalographers, archivists, curators, audience developers, to make sure that they see where in the digitization and the description process they can intervene to come to better contents, and also how in organizing user engagement activities they can take these perspectives into account. And this involves both more technical issues such as metadata management, as indeed curational policies, selection criteria, ways of user empowerment and engagement. So thank you for your presence today, and I hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred, who's not here, but thank you for the video. Yes, and I just wanted to pick up this. I heard a lot of Fred saying a lot minority, and these are terms that we're always kind of looking at and thinking about, and even global majority, BAME, these are all terms that we still struggle with. And so as a consortium, we're thinking about that, but also how that exists in a number of different environments, how people want and choose to self-identify. So again, we're using terminology that we know might be a bit problematic, but also trying to discover where we sit and how we can also model some of that critical reflection that we're doing within the project, and asking organizations like Europeana to do, and also ourselves as people or as artists and researchers, festival curators, what is it and how is it that we advertise, and what language are we using? And so I would like to frame our conversation before we offer this space to Michelle, Mercy, and Baldo with just a little bit of how we landed here. And can you see this slide? Yes, great. Yes, so this is a LabDay that was inspired by, in many ways, by Alvin Ailey, and this new film was the inspiration for bringing people together. But many years ago, Sarah Watley, Hetty Blades, and myself, we co-authored a paper that was looking at leftovers and what is left within kind of archival spaces. How do we talk about how is dance? What is some of what can an image do for us to think about what's in the left over? And in doing that, we were framing our conversation of what dance objects were in Europeana. And so in writing that paper, we wanted to find, and we audited Europeana's dance content. And I found this image, and I knew exactly who it was, what piece it was. I could even think I knew some of the dancers. And there was something very powerful about it that had a haunting kind of quality to it. And when I looked at the metadata, which is down at the bottom, it says it's revelations from Alvin Ailey at the City Center Theater in the Festival d'Avignon in 1977. And there was no copyright known, so no legal restrictions around it. And it just sat with me, and we added it to the paper, but I've always remembered this image. And this image, and Alvin Ailey personally within my own dance career, has had a huge impact. And so it was very odd for the one of the very few dance images that was in Europeana for this one to be there. And I kept asking myself, how did it get here? What's the story behind it? And this is one of, now fast forward 6-7 years, these are some of the questions we're asking ourselves within the project, but also this idea of stories, of framing, of what is left over, how does that continue to live on, what legacies are passed on. And so as a filmmaker, and as someone who is looking at dance and how that then is translated on screen, and also the potential that screen dance has within festivals, I also know that there's a gap in for film festivals to include dance, let alone dance or screen dance. But this film, Still the Slave, is a recent film by a colleague of mine, Nathan Gearing, who I think, Mercy, you know. He sends his regards to you. I saw him yesterday. This is a recent film that's winning several awards. It's a film that is also has closed captioning, that has audio description. It's looking at a contemporary reality. He was responding to Black Lives Matter, and how he, as a Black man, was also living here in the UK, creating work, and so was using this medium of screen dance to open up conversation around these issues. And it's, as I said, it's won many awards. It's bringing together his hip hop background, his circus skills, but again, it's this idea of a modern slave and the potential of dance to look at these really nuanced very personal, sometimes very difficult conversations that we can have, that we should be having, but how do we do that? And so I thought it was a lovely example. And he also, you know, it talks about the importance of African dance and diaspora work and how we can identify or not. And so fast forward to our film of AILEY, it's made me think a lot about AILEY is a person that, you know, is represented, and we talk about a lot in history, as an African-American male who transformed and really opened up and pushed through many walls and boundaries. And the film very beautifully captures that his work and his agency, but through dance. And so it made me really question, how can we continue to bring and allow films like Nathan's Still the Slave, or AILEY's film, or other films that really are opening up and questioning the role that festivals have, the potential that festivals have. And so I felt quite, I'll end my slideshow. I was very honored when, let me stop sharing. Yes, when Michelle contacted me in December to sit on a panel to talk about the AILEY film that you were screening in your festival. And I was going to sit alongside Hope Boykin, who was a former Alvin Ailey dancer. And you know, we can talk about later personally, you know, what Alvin Ailey represented to me, but there was a real kind of wow. And then 2 months later, Mercy sent me a message on WhatsApp saying, Rosa, we have this event we're screening the, you know, AILEY film. Can you come? And I said, yes, I mean, this is a beautiful film. I just saw it. And then I was in another meeting with Baldo, and Baldo was saying, yes, I went to this event with Mercy and I saw, and there was a little bit of a call to action there. And so we're trying to curate and organize something in Bristol around the film. And so these three things in a matter of maybe 6 weeks felt like, okay, there's something here that we would need. How can we connect the dots? And we're all kind of asking the same questions around rights, human rights, the potential film. And so it just kind of naturally came together. And fortunately, I'm in a position at CDARE where I can also use this space of privilege, where, you know, and projects like Weave, where we're also asking these questions to bring and to curate these kinds of conversations. And so I'd like to now offer and open up the conversation and allow you three to present your work. So, Michelle.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me. As a non-dance specialist, and also someone who gets very bamboozled by requests to self-identify, as you might have noticed, I'm delighted to be here, and dance isn't my area of speciality. I am a film scholar at the University of Warwick, who used to be a very traditional film scholar, as in wrote books, wrote articles, still have to do that, though far more intermittently. But I decided in about 2015 that I wanted to direct my fascination with the power of film. It was always about the power, the kind of cultural politics and power of film, with a commitment especially to queer film, queer theory, and critical race studies. I wanted to direct it outwards. I wanted to take that question of the power of film, rather than constantly dissing Hollywood, etc. I wanted to be involved in generating much more productive discussions. And so I took it in two directions. One was setting up Screening Rights Film Festival, which is a social justice film festival that I started in 2015 when I was at the University of Birmingham. And the other was to start being involved in making films. I'm not a filmmaker, so what I was doing was using my, I guess, my cultural and intellectual and professional privilege to harness funds to work with filmmakers, work with cultural organizations to get films made and explore how film could change storytelling, could change how we understand. The very first project that I did was at a hospice, so it was really looking at telling stories of people affected by terminal illness, and specifically how you could challenge stereotypes, and you could you return the voice to the people whose voice film has always represented instead. So those were the kind of two ways. Screening Rights Film Festival has endured with some difficulty. As I said, it's a social justice film festival, so it's about bringing international social justice films that I would call particularly important. My curatorial practice, which isn't how I normally would term it, but of course inevitably I have to, and especially as I increasingly talk about it as a practice and write, and will be writing more about it as a practice and as a political practice. It's the emphasis is upon an importance in terms of a film's ethics. What I mean by this is that film is an extraordinary medium, and its huge value for me is the way in which it connects us to other people's experiences, especially experiences of adversity. Sometimes that's kind of condensed as suffering. How does film connect us to suffering? And I think it does it in a far more intense and ethical, as in makes us feel with and for and towards and all those other kinds of words that are so important, the individual who you're watching, in a way that other media don't necessarily. There are times, however, where I bring films into the program because they're just so important, because the story hasn't been told at all or much. So there have been occasions where it's not been a great film. And by great, I mean it has lent on cliche and some of the tropes that I would normally call unethical if I was going into it in depth. But it was so important. I'm thinking specifically of a film about the Armenian genocide a few years ago, that there was just so little and it was so important. That was one of our first sold out events. And the reason why that was so successful was because I worked so closely with people in that community. And that, for me, is the secret to building audiences. And it's all about building audiences that represent the individuals who are most spoken to by the film, who will most benefit from the film. At the same time, of course, bringing those people in completely change the landscape of the venue, and a venue that is inevitably struggling to tick the box of diversity or whatever it is, and its outreach aims and whatever else it has said that it's going to be doing and needs to be doing and wants to be doing. I'm not saying it doesn't want to be doing, but we all know how easily cultural institutions and venues fall short on this. But for me, the secret for any sold out event has always been, or popular event has always been, working, that's my priority, is working closely, ensuring that someone who is from within the community is who's inevitably in the best place to be generating and bringing that audience in. So the festival is all about sharing those films, extending the audience for these important films that wouldn't necessarily get that audience, especially not in the Midlands, where films won't necessarily come. But it's also about extending debate on the films, and that's key. So key to the curatorial practice is finding the experts who are going to do a wonderful job of creating an extraordinary event, because that's, for me, sometimes more than the film, which you can see anywhere within reason, having just said how difficult it is perhaps to see it in the Midlands. But anyway, more than seeing the film, it's discussing it afterwards. Those are the unique and in many ways transformative spaces that you can create, and I have the privilege to create. So let's watch the trailer, if we can. Thank you. This is the trailer from last year's event that included AILEY for the festival.
Do you feel as though you had to sacrifice anything to stay in dance?
Uh-oh. No, you've got the wrong, it's the wrong one. I'm not sure why. This is the trailer for AILEY. It's the trailer for the festival.
Screendance.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the
Really right. Thank you.
Sorry, just bear with me a second.
That's okay. What you'll notice as Kelsey's doing it is that dedicated to social justice, a variety of films. Each year I will endeavour to be mixing it up I always show a film from Palestine because that's a priority of mine. And otherwise, I try to vary. There's an emphasis always on international issues that might be pressing, films, as I said, that stories that haven't been heard before, but of course, caring about not over-representing one region of the world each year. There's an attempt to bring in countries and filmmakers we haven't heard from before.
It's my baby.
Celebrating over brunch. Black families. Black families.
عن جد مش حابب احكي والله هيك اشتقت له.
It's a powerful tool, is the truth, and the truth doesn't go away. It's there from day one, and it'll be there till the day that I die.
So there's a range of content, obviously, and AILEY was the first dance film that I'd included in the programme. It's the first dance film that I had come across in the way that I will choose content, as in the festivals that I attend, the word of mouth that I inevitably hear about, and my survey of the festival circuit and the films that are winning awards or creating, interest during the year previously. So AILEY had a specific place within that and an unusual, and it's very much a commercially oriented film. I was also, encouraged to program it because at Warwick Arts Centre, there has always been a strong dance focus audience. So that was another reason that for me, it was important to have. I've also always been a big fan of AILEY anyway. So I was delighted to be programming the film. It's not a film that is explicitly like the other films that I was screening. So in this way, it's social justice. It's interesting. Social justice, or the social justice theme of the festival, is often about the content, but of course it's not just. It's about the curation. It's about how these films sit next to each other. But the last thing I really wanted to mention about AILEY is, having said that what's so important to me and the focus of my research is how film is an ethical medium, and because of how it connects us to other people's adversity or experience, and connects us in a way that moves us or transforms us to do stuff or change our thinking. That's most easily done when you have this highly charged, difficult, demanding content. But what was extraordinary about the screening of AILEY at last year's festival, which Russell was involved in, is that, as I'm sure she'll remember, we had an audience member who asked a question of both of them, I think of Hope, but before asking it, spoke about his being profoundly moved by the film. And this is someone actually who happens to be a PhD, now ex-PhD student of mine, who has no interest in dance, as he's declared, hadn't watched anything like it, didn't know who AILEY was, but he completely epitomized both the power of film, the wonder of festivals, but obviously the extraordinary potential of dance as well, because it was how he was so moved by dance in a physical way that he spoke of, as if he had had this kind of sensorial bodily experience that was unknown to him before, that connected him so profoundly to the film, that really struck me as the potential of dance resonating within my concerns around affecting audiences. So it's great to be a part of this event, and I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Yes, and the that particular weekend, there was, I think people might remember, there was a huge snowstorm. It was, I was impressed that people even made it to the space and that the festival continued, because there were so many, it felt like obstacles in the way. You were bringing myself in and Hope into the space. So there was that technical challenge. And even through that, this Zoom, you could feel his emotion and the vulnerability that he was also kind of sitting with it himself, but also sharing, and how moved and touched he was. And as you say, it was, this potential for films, and also AILEY's story and the way the film starts to capture that, his life and some of the tension or the questions, or open questions that, maybe dance historians or community dancers might have around AILEY. It was very beautiful. And before we move to Mercy, I think we should just honor we've been talking about the film. We're not going to show you the film today, but we will show you a little trailer of the film that gives you a sense of who's involved, kind of honoring his legacy, but also within a very contemporary framework with current dancers. So Kozer, if we could have that trailer, please. And please do use the chat. I see some people are saying goosebumps. I think that was after watching the trailer on the Screendance, on the trailer for the festival. Please do use the chat for any, to share any thoughts, questions.
Just bear with me a second. I'm just struggling to find that link. Rosa, if you've got it, can you share it, please?
Yes, I got it. Okay, I'll share screen. Pop. Can you see my screen? Yes? Okay.
Yes. Everything.
The AILEY American Dance Theater is one of the most important contemporary dance companies in the world.
People were just, oh my God, they've never seen anything like it.
Choreographers start with an empty space, a body or two. We say carve the space. I love creating something where there was nothing before. I was born in the Depression, 1931. Rural country, tough times. When I was 13, I discovered the theater. And it touched something in me, but there was no Mardi Gras.
Alvin entertained my dreams that a black boy could actually dance.
Being able to say through the choreography, I am, it transcends dance.
I had my own ideas. Not just to do a step, but to feel something.
He was working at a feverish pitch, totally immersed.
People say, why is he doing that now? If you're a black anything in this country, people want to put you into a bag.
This is what he took up as his crusade. Alvin's protest was on the stage.
And I want to feel all the anger and the sense of cursing at the outside room. I wanted to do the kind of dance that could be done from out on the streets to people, that it was part of their culture. And that it was universal.
So, lovely trailer, I think. Makes me want to go. Oh!
Lincoln Center at the Movies is made possible by major...
Makes me want to see the film again. So, yes, so now I'd love to offer the space to Mercy. Mercy.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, everybody. I'm really excited. I mean, that film, the trailer just brings back memories of how I kind of, I've been in contact with AILEY for some time now, during my career in dance, and the artists that work with AILEY. And every time I watch this film, I just feel it's such an important film. And, you know, it's something that will live on and live on forever and ever. And I agree with what Michelle is saying. It's kind of, you know, something so, you know, curating film into spaces is just priceless. So I'm excited to be sharing this space with you all, and the perspective that I bring to this important topic, more so now than ever, as we're mostly operating in the digital spaces now. And so I will share my perspective from the production management side of things, providing platforms, curating at conferences and festivals and in various spaces, but also leveraging this with my artistic background. My background is performing arts. I studied film, photography. I'm a choreographer and dance practitioner, and also African drama, traditional drums. And so I connect with so many different people, and I'm just kind of borrowing from what Michelle was talking about. Curating a space and a transformative space is about the people that you bring together to create that special space. And so I was really privileged to be connected to this AILEY film because of the connections I have from the background, from the career and the work that I've been doing for a decade at least, you know, that brought me into connection with the different people that I can bring together and know that they will create something which is quite exciting, a conversation or whatever. So I am the director of Kalma Arts now, and prior to setting up my company, I worked with One Dance UK, which was formed by a merger of 4 organizations, key dance organizations, to form One Dance UK, one of which was ADAD, the Association of Dance of the African Diaspora. So I think I'll put this in context in terms of even why Michaela from Dark Matter connected with me, because everywhere she was going, she wanted to, she was talking to me and say, oh, speak to Mercy, because I had that connection with the different people. And so during my tenure with ADAD and One Dance UK, I worked on many programs to raise profiles and awareness of the practice of dance of the African diaspora, the artists and the art forms. And I will mention 2 of the many programs that we developed, or you know, I inherited and then developed into something different, and it is relevant to this discussion. One of the festivals that I curated was the Bloom Festival, which started at the South Bank, and we developed it to later become the Bloom National Festival of Dance of the African Diaspora, which ran across the UK. And it was celebrating the art form, the artists in the African diaspora. And it included dance on stage, site-specific performances, talks, debates, and workshops, and most importantly, film, which was little clips of films which were from across the world, but within the diaspora. And many of these are not seen anywhere. They're not curated in the cinemas, they're not put into festivals. But actually, that was an important platform to bring things to, because it was targeting new audiences in new spaces. And so the format that we eventually adapted was to present Bloom as a festival within larger festivals. And so it became a household name, and internationally, it reached artists that presented here, and also invited artists, and also those artists then invited them to present in festivals abroad, in the US, in Canada, on the continent, and, you know, in Europe as well. So that was a really, you know, just giving an example of, you know, how we can bring people together and actually create a buzz and create something bigger at festivals. And what better way to do it with film, you know, bringing new things. Another flagship program was the international conference called Regenerations. And that was, it brought together practice and academia under one roof to present, to debate and share knowledge with an aim to shape future practice. And actually, this is where I met Rosa, and she was presenting at the time. Interestingly, the theme of the last conference we produced in 2019 was themed Dance and the Digital Space. And we didn't know that it was going to be such an important reflection and thought and, kind of medium, because this is where, the digital space is becoming more and more important. And it took us through 2 years, at least during the COVID period, and it's going to live on and it's become more and more important. So I wanted to kind of just identify those 2 flagship programs, which I think are really important to bringing to the forefront the art forms and the people that are not represented into festivals, into thinking about those transformative spaces, and actually film for posterity, for instance. Fast forward, my company Kauma Arts, which I set up, operates remotely, and we're daily getting familiar with this space. It's got challenges, but mostly it has opportunities that it brings to work with organizations and individuals to connect communities, sharing knowledge and advance art forms and creativity in new ways. So we provide this space for meaningful exchange globally, and our work is international, collaborative, intergenerational, interculture, and it's across art forms. And I'm so excited that we took the stance of kind of working across art forms, because at the moment I'm working with, we're working with Rosa and her team, and we have created a manifesto, but it's from conversations that came from the work that we do, and it's across art forms as well. And film and festival is one of the things that we started talking about, which was really interesting. It was somebody from Nigeria who runs festivals and somebody from Kenya who is a film producer. So it was very, very interesting conversation. And so I'm so excited that something is coming out of that as well. Now, our work, of course, we have the digital hub, and then we have a consultancy working with different organizations, and then we have a charitable arm. So one of the key programs that we developed, and the reason I'm here today, is the Kauma Brief Encounters, which brings together creatives in public, physical and digital spaces to exchange ideas, cultivate collaboration, and deepen the artistic value for art forms within the African diaspora and Africa, the continent. And so I see Kauma Arts as an important place where we provide a platform that spotlights the work of creatives registered with Kauma Arts, but also beyond the artists that we work with. And the brief encounter that was dedicated to AILEY happened on the 6th of January this year. And that is also where I met with Sinibaldo, and it became, because of that, we then, as Rosa was talking during her introduction, that's how then we became co-chairs of the Bristol chapter that came about. And I just wanted to just talk a little bit about what the brief was when they gave us, when Michaela came and gave us that the work to support her, to promote and create a buzz around the film. And so we had to host and facilitate a Zoom session with key participants from across the UK dance community, mainly the Black dance community, with an aim to network, to celebrate, and bring the film at the heart of the discussion. So the evening was with 4 key speakers that responded to a provocation. It was a couple of provocations that we came from. Everybody watched the film, and then we created the provocation for them to then present from their perspectives of lived experience, experiencing Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre Company. And each one of them actually was connected to them by either, one of them had a scholarship there and the other person went to a summer school, and then another person, all of them had something to say about Alvin Ailey, the person, and Alvin Ailey, the studio, working in, kind of being there in the studio, a lived experience. So that was very, very special, and it really moved the discussion further. And so it was, the provocations helped us, of course, to focus on the film, but I think that the lived experience was so important and very exciting. And also, just before I forget, this was done in partnership, actually, because Dogwolf, I think they were the ones who were distributing the film. They're the leading documentary film distributor in the UK, and they're regarded as the foremost documentary specialist brand in the world. So that was quite an important thing. And if I wasn't, if Michaela then came to me because she knew the dance world and wanted to find out, how can she bring audiences dance from the dance world, from the Black communities as well. And that one is a marketing agency that we collaborated with and worked to connect the Black audiences with ambitious creative culture projects across the regions. So I just wanted to highlight how everything is interconnected and how we are talking about joining the dots and connecting, and that cross arts is really, really important in terms of making sure that, things that need to be seen are brought to the forefront. And I will not talk a lot about the AILEF, the chapter in Bristol, because Sinibaldo then invited me to be a co-chair because of the fact that he actually he came to my event. And so the ripple effect is happening. And for me, I feel that film has actually played a really important part of connecting these communities. The conversation was about creating a buzz around the beautifully crafted film, but it's moved on to networking and actually focusing on even further and more things. And then we start thinking and seeing the intersectionalities that are happening with AILEY, the film itself, So, and because I made a call to the action, this connection then started to move. So I will stop here because we can discuss this later in terms of teasing out what it is that we, in terms of, we don't have enough of this happening. How can we make it happen? And, so many questions are coming into my mind when and I'm pleased and delighted that we are having this conversation because it needs to be moved even further. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Mercy. Yes, and after Baldo's presentation, we will kind of really look at teasing out some of those questions and looking at what would a next step be, because I think that's the hope. Well, that is the hope of the capacity buildings. LabDays is thinking about how can other people do it? Why should other people do? Really have this on their radar and that potential. But before we get there, Baldo, if you would like to frame the Bristol chapter, as Mercy said. Yes. Thank you. I can't hear you, Baldo. I can see the slide, but I can't hear you.
Sorry.
No
I
problem.
am muted and I think you can see the slides. All right, so thank you very much again for the invitation, and I will follow up on Mercy and keep tracking this ripple effect and also see how I got into this trajectory. So so this is the holding card of the screening we hosted in Bristol. And but before going to that, I want to tell about how I connected to this, to Alvin Ailey and to the documentary and to especially Revelations. It's through movement notation, lab annotation. So I'm a movement annotator, and I'm now completing an advanced degree in France. And last year, we had this exercise of reconstructing a piece from the score. And this was a work, an exercise done together with my classmates. And we choose to work on revelations. So we took the score that was notated by Ray Cook in '97. And each of us took an extract of the dance, and we learned the score, and then we transmitted it to dancers in the Conservatoire in Paris. So I'm just showing you there a page of it to see how it looks like. And then we transmitted this to these very great dancers studying at the Conservatoire. And on my side, I did all of this in Bristol, because this is where I'm based, and I couldn't travel to Paris back then because of COVID. So all the preparation was done in my living room. And then you can see that I'm rehearsing there. And I transmitted the score through Zoom to a dancer. I mean, it was a great exercise because I always loved AILEY, I mean, as much as I knew. And this was a great way to get into it and to learn about it. But there was a lot of other things that I wanted to connect with, and especially in relation to Bristol, because I'm living there, and there is a great scene in terms of dance of the African diaspora. And it is at the same time as just before we started to work on the Revelation screening that I connected with all the movement that is going on, has been going on here with the Colston statue removal, the protest. And it is in this context that I met Cleo Lake, who is a choreographer and who was also Lord Mayor of the city. And so there was something about black dance and Bristol that I really was eager to kind of explore or delve more into. And then it is, okay, this is another way I want to explain how I got really interested in revelations. So I am, this is really not my area, because I've been doing research on adaptations of rituals from also a minority community or a marginal community. And I agree with what Rosa was saying at the beginning about the terms. Of course, we know they are problematic. Anyway, I worked on adaptations on the stage of rituals of the Alevis from Turkey. And it is in this adaptation process of bringing on the stage communities and traditional forms that have not been visible, have been kept quite in the corner, that I found a great comparison with what Revelations did in the 60s in the United States and then worldwide. So by looking at the context of Alevi representations on the stage in Turkey and also in Europe, I kind of find this very important terms of reference and how we can kind of learn from one experience to understand another. This is another piece that I'm currently working on. And also, I mean, especially interested in also the role of notation as a kind of a stage in this process of making visibility and kind of getting out of that marginal position and having an impact. So I joined the event that Mercy spoke about at the beginning of January when the film was released in England. And actually, I met Mercy. Mercy said we met there, but we had met already before for the Intersectionality and Inclusion Symposium that I helped organized with the Society for Dance Research in collaboration with CDER and Kanduko. And this is really has been a great occasion for me to learn a lot about learn from each other by being in conversation with other people who are working on similar things and trying to bring all this kind of intersections together in terms of dance presence and dance curating. I don't know if I'm also not too familiar with the term, but it is back then that we met with Mercy, and I learned about Kauma arts. And then it is after joining our Q&A that she organized with Kauma Arts on the 6th of January that I felt that maybe this was a good occasion to kind of put the dots together. And so I want to tell about how I saw the film. I went to see it in Bath because it was not screened in Bristol. On the day of the national, it was screened in many places nationwide on the 4th of January, I think. But there was really few people. I expected it would be a bit more crowded, but there were, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 people in the cinema. And I thought we have to do this in Bristol, and we had to do it at the Cube, which is an art space and cinema, but is a community-owned cinema in Bristol. So it's a place where it's possible to do things which you wouldn't find in other mainstream channels. And basically, because I'm a volunteer there, and the Cube is run by volunteers, I tried to propose that we host a screening of AILEY. But I'm also volunteering as now event secretary at the Society for Dance Research. And so I try to bridge together these two realities that didn't know each other. And we managed to organize in really few weeks, like 2-3 weeks, with Mercy, with the Society for Dance Research and the Cube, a screening of the film, which was quite a good success because we had, I think, about 60 tickets sold between in-person and online, because this was also an hybrid event. Kind of thought and organized in a moment when things were really not certain in terms of COVID and not COVID, but we managed to put it all together. And we could host, after the film, a choreographic forum, which is a format of discussion and debate on dance that is kind of established by the Society for Dance Research already for a while now. I'm not sure when that started, but it's a format that would normally bring together people to discuss a dance work. And this would normally not be a film, but it is, in this occasion, we decided to work with a film that people could have watched earlier or could watch that day through the Cube server. And then we brought together people to discuss it. So we could organize two panels. And the first was with scholars. One of them was Thomas de France, who of course is an expert on revelations, and he wrote an important book about it already in 2004. And then we had Adeshola Akinleye, who also edited a book on Black dance in the UK. And so this was a bit like to frame and to get closer to the context that we really wanted to engage with, which is the community of Black dancers in Bristol. And indeed, the second panel was really focusing on Bristol practitioners. And in there, we had Cleo Lake join us, and Rachel de Garang, and then also Ruba, Norman Stevenson joined us. Now I'm trying to, I had some pictures about how it looked like, the hybrid format. I wanted to mention this project, also thinking of enslavement and memory and dance. I wanted to mention this project that also Cleo spoke about there. It's a project that is still going on in Bristol, and I'm also joining in. And again, there is strong this idea of putting the community together, and how the digital and community kind of help each other to rethink and reframe the we know. So you can also look on the website. There is gonna be a digital material produced on an app with dance, but also with the occasion to rethink the architecture in Bristol and memory of enslavement in Bristol in really in conversation with through dance. Now, just I wanted to mention that, and also maybe to close, I wanted to offer you this poem that was written by Letitia Cesar, who is a dance artist from born in Brooklyn, but originally from Haiti. And she was joining in the event. She's also based in Bristol and doing great work with dance. But her father passed away the day of the screening, and so she couldn't join at the end. But she wrote this poem that I think is quite touching, and I think I will use this couple of minutes that are left to leave you the time to read it, if that is fine.
Thank you, Baldo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the three presenters, to Michelle, to Mercy, and to Baldo. I see there have been some comments. Thank you, Marie-Louise, for putting the Regenerations link in the chat. Sally, you say, great how these things have linked up, and even remember some of these other events online, including the Bristol event. Yes, I think I saw there was a picture of you in Baldo's slide that you were in the audience. So yes, I'd like to now offer up a space for us to just take a moment to breathe. We've heard a lot of information, all revolving around and honoring AILEY in some way, looking at these questions around screen dance, curatorial practices, festivals, language around minorities, cultural communities, how we kind of ethical practices in curating events. And we will now open up the space for conversation, but I do want to also put the Padlets in for this event, that you're welcome to, if you want to keep sharing thoughts or maybe prefer to write, you're able to use this Padlet space. It's a digital online space where we have 3 questions or 4 questions that we're looking at, and you're welcome to offer your thoughts and also share this link with others to offer their thoughts. You're welcome to sign or to be anonymous on that space, or to frame, and say who you are and your perspective. It's completely open. But some of the questions that are on there, but also the larger questions we've been looking at today. Lack of dance films in film festival. Is there a need for curating more dance-related content? The other question is lack of diversity in the cultural heritage sector. Black and African diaspora dance community is underrepresented. How can we challenge this reality? Another question is, can using dance films and curatorial techniques open up spaces to explore intersectionality through dance? And what comes to mind when you think of Alvin Ailey? So big questions there. I think we could all maybe do an essay for each one, but I'd now like to open up the space to all of us to ask each other questions, reflections, any memories on Ailey you might have. Yes. You're welcome to turn your cameras on or off. Yes, I see someone coming. Hi, Gita. Hello. Did you have a question? No. Okay. Hello. Well, I have a question, actually. Michelle, did you want to say something?
Yeah, but it can wait.
No. Please go ahead.
I just really wanted to ask, it was something Mercy had said about film for posterity, which of course is an obvious way in which film is how you're all talking about it in some ways. And of course, I mentioned, but of course others have brought up the power of film that resonates with dance, or how dance resonates with film in terms of the connection it creates for audience and the participants on stage and off, or in audience and on screen. So I'm really wondering what is the role of film? Is it a functional one to just create more, to do that job of bringing Black dance, for example, to wider audiences, or is it about enhancing what intersectional dance, or the power of dance for whatever intersectional purposes, or etc. What is that role for everybody? Because that seems quite important.
I can go first. Thank you, Michelle, for kind of spotting, kind of like bringing that out, because I feel that one of the things that that's helped, that filmed helped when I was director for Adad, was to bring, to keep that, to bring about posterity. And it was a remit that I had to do. But I think because we were a dance organization and it was a small organization, by partnering with another cross-art, which is film, we managed to lengthen the, kind of the information to get it to reach internationally. And also, just to put something in perspective with the AILEY film, there was a clip on Catherine Dunham as well. I mean, most of the people had never, probably would not have seen Catherine Dunham, but because of this film AILEY, which is now a new film, in fact, there was a lot of archival material, and I think it was beautifully put together in terms of bringing all of that together and sharing it in the modern world. For me, I think what you're saying, I think it's all of those things that you've mentioned. The role of film is so vast, and I think there's more things that we need to identify in terms of bringing, the role of film in our worlds. So I think it's evolving as well. That's all I can say for now.
Anyone else like to offer any thoughts on the role of film? I have a question for you, Michelle. You mentioned in your presentation ethical kind of practices, and you also talked about working or including the community or people from those films, or that might kind of be identified in some way with the film. How do you do that? How do you, you mentioned you gave the Armenian film as an example. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like? Yes.
In many ways, it's the most important thing. It's also the hardest thing, because I should probably say, I do it as part of my job running the festival, but it is a job in itself. And I obviously work in a very kind of demanding and quite highly demanding, whatever, prestigious place. It requires a certain, so there's no allowance. There's never been any allowance for my labor within my job on the festival. So if you couple that with the kinds of outreach that is so important to be done, you can appreciate the limitations of this. So it really, the most successful films have been the one where I've known somebody, I've already had a contact, or I've been put in touch with someone who was able to take on the kind of the promotion, if you want to, in commercial terms, even though nothing about it is commercial, but that promoting of the event to their community. Another really successful one was a film called Unrest, which was about ME. Extraordinary film, because there hadn't been a film about ME as a condition. And when I saw it, and I'm giving this example because I think that's what's, I'm sort of saying these things all work in a similar way. So that when you have a cinema audience, and I think I first saw it at Sheffield Doc Fest, and the cinema audience was filled with family members of ME sufferers, or the ME sufferers themselves, if they were well enough to be able to be in there, to watch a film that had never had that content before. So it was, I think, one of the most intense and intimate experiences I've had, because you're in an audience that has been properly, it's been properly promoted, properly, the outreach has been really, really solid. I think they were working with the BFI, they had money for that project to do outreach. And the director, who was an ME sufferer, had come over, and they paced it all to sort of work with her frailties and changes in health. And it was extraordinary. So that kind of legwork has to happen. Because otherwise, or over time, if you have your annual event, that over time these things build and word of mouth. So I do the festival in both Coventry and Birmingham, where I've been doing it since the beginning. I will always get a decent audience, even without that kind of intense targeting of community groups, because I already have those links in those communities, and they'll do the work and people will know, and you sort of build those audiences that way. But Coventry, where I haven't got that, it was a nightmare, coupled with COVID, snowstorms, venues not having been opened, and for 2 years, and all kinds of things. So I think that's the most important thing, but the hardest thing to achieve. But in many ways, it's the priority. I almost feel like unless that is your priority, don't do it, because why fill a room with the same 4 people who will always come to an event at a certain venue? What's the point? And certainly, what's the politics behind it?
Absolutely. And something that you touched on was the kind of labor and working with the community, and that as I kind of like to use the community connector that is able to work with the institution but also the community, but that takes time and trust, and that we also have to allow that to happen organically and respectfully. And I don't know if Mercy or anyone in the space would like to maybe talk a little bit about that, because I know, Mercy, you and I have talked a lot about, let's give the events and the time that they need. And that can sometimes be difficult when you do have the agendas, the funding, all of those kind of priorities. So it is a bit of a balancing act, and numbers. This idea earlier, I think Michelle, you said everyone touched on numbers in some way, kind of getting people into those spaces, and if you have 4 or 400, where are the values, and what are is it for enough? It should be, but because we have these other pressures for priority, etc., and also we're thinking about the sector where we have to really kind of somehow validate our, constantly having to prove that, yes, this dance film was able to generate or bring in X amount of people. Therefore, we have the potential to curate another dance film or more dance films. There's a lot of the questions and tensions. And so how do we, as a community, really try to reflect on that? And so I don't know if anyone else has questions or feelings about that, because
can I just say a tiny bit before anyone kind of comes in? In terms of this AILEY, and when we got approached by Michaela, the brief was to get the film, to get audiences, Black communities in the regions to get into the cinemas to watch the film. Now, these are areas where, well, there's not that many Black people in the area, or people who don't necessarily go to film or cinemas. And it was such a hard call. But what I did say is that, I suggested the brief encounter on Zoom and said, oh, but how many people are going to be there? And, all of that. And I said, well, probably 5, probably 20, probably, but what we're trying to create is a ripple effect. And actually, I kind of raised the point that it's about the time, it's about the ripple effect. It's, one person telling the other. And during that event, actually, I think Baldo said there was only 5 people that came to Bristol, where you went. And then there was one person who also came in and said she was the only person in Blackpool that went to watch that film. Now, the ripple effect that's being created now is, kind of like there's loads more. Like Baldo, you did talk about the fact that there was about 60 people, 60 plus people who watched the AILEY film. And because of the fact that you wanted it in Bristol, you started conversation. So film was the way into that door of bringing the film to Bristol, and because of your connection with the Cube. So I don't know whether you want to say more about that. So I feel, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was happy to comment a bit more on that, because I feel like, also thinking of Michelle's question, I think I see film somehow very functional, as a functional tool that enables that conversation or that getting together. But for me, the most important priority in terms of organizing this event was really that connecting moment and this kind of more presence event. I mean, like the event itself of working together with Mercy was a delight and a big learning experience, the process of doing it. And then also the event itself, realizing how people who are maybe also doing similar things in a similar environment, they don't get that occasion to get together. And the film, so was the priority, was really to make it grounded in what we need in Bristol, and how can we speak back about the film from here. So the community engagement was really, I suppose, a priority, and the film allowed that. But yeah, I felt that was the
priority. Yeah. And of course, we're having conversations with somebody in Italy, or a couple of other artists who are in Italy who want that film as well. So it takes time to build communities, but it does, work. And, with the medium of film, that's not going to go away. I think it's a really interesting way of building communities.
And I think there's something there also around, we haven't talked too much today around this theme around social justice, and how that, well, in the AILEY film was very much in there, but in a very it was honoring the way that AILEY also used and was an activist through his dance and through the person that he was. And I don't know, Michelle, if you want to talk a little bit about, that strand of social justice for you and how films do that, and particularly, films that look at these embodied realities and histories that are often maybe very difficult to capture on film as well. Yes.
Well, I forgot what I was going to say, but I guess what you're talking had made me think of is that, I saw AILEY, especially in the darker days of the last few years, and I'm including pre-pandemic, when there was the election, and there was the general election here that was just coming, and the festival for that year 2019 was just before that, and we just had Brexit. The trouble when you're doing social justice film festival is that that's a lot of hard films to watch, and if there are difficult times, for me, curating it has always also been a balance between the times and what I feel people can cope with, and that's hard to know, but some kind of barometer of the times, and what they can't. So the level of uplift that I'm including now, was a film that is very uplifting. I want to say, oh yes, because you said, this sense of it being functional, that it provides this space to discuss all these issues. But there is something wonderful about her filmmaking in terms of the choreographing of the archival material and the other material. So there is something very, I don't want to call it the standard editing of a filmmaker. It's choreography, and it's that you are not simply watching dance as a film spectator. You are somehow, because of how she's editing not just the footage, but also other scenes of AILEY, other kind, there's a way in which it feels very dancery. That's the only, I'm saying that in all my naivety as a non-dance person, but a fan of that dance company and his work. Yeah, that's what it filmed to me. So I can see how it's functional. I also can see how it can never be only functional, because it depends on how it's made. I was really curious to know, slightly off topic, sorry, Rosa, but I'm really interested to know how film is used, because film's used in so many of the other art practices increasingly now, and I write about its use in theatre and in kind of like conventional gallery spaces as well. And I'm curious how, is it not being used within dance? Are dancers not creating works that also use film, that project that? So that was another question of how it can only ever, if it can. I can see it has this really important functional role. I think I've said enough, but you can come back to social justice question if you want to.
Yes, thank you. I think that, you asked earlier, we were talking about kind of the potential, or the, why film and what it might do. And I just wanted to share that I think that there's also something around representation and legacy, and what the film really beautifully does, as you've been saying, is it weaves in that archival footage, the dancers' voices, the love and respect that they had for AILEY and still have for the company. But there's also, something very powerful that you can see yourself, or a part of yourself identified in that, and that human spirit very much comes through. And that's what I think makes it so transformative and transcends, a festival or a community. And it's a global film that people can respond to. And of course, there's beautiful dancing. And, these, looking at dance, and dance, screen dance or dance documentaries, there's a lot there. We have a few minutes left, so I won't kind of open that up. But I do think that there's a real potential with dance. Currently, we have a show opening, and the show is a gallery space that has mainly visual artists, and I've offered a screen dance film that has also audio description and closed captioning, and so we have kind of different versions of the same screen dance film. And the gallery is a little bit kind of unsure how to treat this film. They don't know how it needs to sit in the space. Is it an installation? Is it what will people do with the audio description version of it? How? And I opened up the conversation looking at Nathan Gearing's film that does that as well, that is again looking at being a slave. I'm a slave, and he does that with audio description and closed captioning. So again, it's still very new, and it's disrupting. It has the potential to really disrupt spaces that are, let's say, maybe forward thinking in some ways, but dance offers another potential to really challenge that. Any final thoughts in these last minutes?
I just want to mention a film because Michelle, when you were speaking, this film came back to my mind, and I thought, oh, you should know about this. It's called Working Dancers. It's a documentary about a national dance company in Argentina and the fights that they are going on to create a law for dance work in Argentina. And is directed by Costantina Bosmora, who's an Athens filmmaker and a dance scholar, and Julia Ayman. And I was thinking so much about that, and I wanted to mention that.
What was it called again?
It's called Working Dancers.
Right, thank you.
The link, because I think it would be a great also start for conversations about what you're doing, I think, with human rights. And
thank you, thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please do offer any more thoughts on the Padlet. Yes, Michelle, I'm aware of the time. Thank you to all for being part of this conversation, and let's see if we can curate or share more screen dance in more festivals. Maybe AILEY, if you want to get in touch with Mercy, she'd be happy to support. Here I am offering you for more work. But yes, thank you. As always, we always have an outro, for an intro and an outro, and I'd like to wish you a lovely day. Thank you all.